The dogmen tracked us clear across the lake. Dear Scary Stories NYC. My family owns property on the edge of a certain lake in a particular area of the Midwest that has a reputation of being haunted with cryptids and other mysterious phenomena. During our first 6 months owning the land, all sorts of strange things began to take place, but it all died out about half a year in. It's been years and years since anything happened on the family land that was any scarier than the time that raccoon gave birth out in the woods behind the house. For that reason, and also for the sake of our immediate neighbors, I don't want to get too specific about where this all took place. Just imagine your own patch of quiet beach on a quiet lake in the middle of a quiet little suburbs, nestled in a quiet little woods. And you're here where we are lucky enough to get to live. So when we first moved to that house, the other homeowners from around the lake welcomed us. They brought us gifts and invited us to agree to share the lake equally among all of us. That meant we could all use it for fishing or swimming, and rather than slicing it up as a pie, we'd all agree that it belonged to each family equally. My dad and I used to like going out on a rowboat and fishing, but we'd usually get it out of our system each year in 1 or 2 days. Well, we couldn't wait to get out there and see if our neighbors' descriptions of catching big walleye and bass out there were really true or just fish stories. On our first Saturday out there, before we were even really fully unpacked, Dad and I went out into the middle of the lake in the dark hours just before dawn to see who or what might be biting. Now, obviously, we had expected to find fish, but we found a strange species of upright canine land predator instead. So before I launch into what my father and I saw, I should really point out that it was my mother who experienced the first strangeness inside the house, and it was not cryptid related. When my mother went down to the basement, she turned on the overhead light, then remembered she had left something upstairs. When she grabbed whatever it was and came back down, the overhead light was out again. Reaching to the wall switch to once again turn the lights on, my mother found her hand instead touching what felt like the clammy fingers of a freezing cold old hand. They were covering the light switch, preventing her from illuminating the room. From the darkness in front of her, she heard a stern voice tell her, "I just turned that off." Mom ran upstairs screaming, then blamed me and my father for the rest of the night, saying it must have been us playing a prank on her. I know I didn't know what to make of it that night, and I wondered if Mom was seeing things. Within a week, though, we'd all begun to have our own run-ins with mysterious creatures, voices, and even strange ideas that seemed to be getting planted in our minds. But then a second weird thing happened that Saturday morning, when a whole pack of upright Midwestern walking dogmen took a special interest in the fishing adventure that my father and I were in the middle of enjoying. Now, first of all, we overshot the center of the lake and decided to drift further toward the opposite shore. It was mostly just to get to see more of the place, to get a sense of its true size and depth, but also to see if we could get a feel on where the fish were. It was as we made our way back around to the center of the lake that we first got attacked by something leaping up out of the water, splashing foam and waves in every direction. I thought I was in a Jaws sequel when the lake erupted like that, but it wasn't a shark or any kind of water creature that I saw in those waves leaping up out of the lake. It wasn't Michael Myers either, I'll tell you that. But it most definitely was some kind of a canine. Some weird old big wet dog. So this thing burst upward from the water, but he landed with long hairy arms reaching into and across our rowboat. Its claws were so long and sharp that it was almost like steel spikes, gripping our little wooden craft and not wanting to let go. That dogman was like a man of steel, except for the fact that he wasn't actually a man at all. We beat on that beast with the oars, with our boots, however we could. We dislodged his long nails from the soft wood of the boat as many times as he'd sink them right back in. I remember somehow getting him back in the water and slamming the oars down over and over again, wherever we thought the beast might surface next. Long after we stopped seeing him, we kept chopping at the water in case he might come up again. I don't really know if he got away or what, but after a while, we couldn't see him anymore, and so both my father and myself slumped down into the boat, our chests heaving, trying to get some oxygen back inside our exhausted bodies. I remember the next thing that happened was the moaning and the howling. It started in one direction, where we could hear a large canine yowling and howling. Then another location sounded off an alarm-like howl, and a third, and a fourth. Soon I could see figures just near or just off the shoreline in nearly every direction in the dim light before the sun comes up. There were man-sized men, giant-sized men, hairy, wolf-headed men, and their glowing eyes all faced toward the center of the lake. In every direction was another hairy, giant, dog-headed biped, none of them wearing a stitch of clothing, all of them walking straight out of Stone Age nightmares into the backyards of our family and all our neighbors. If we looked toward our own part of the shore, we would see them, solid black silhouettes, standing upright, back in the shadows, their bright, pale, almost yellowish eyes, staring hungrily back out at us like they'd never seen humans or a boat before. It felt like we were lost in a horror movie landscape, or maybe back before the dawn of civilization. The boat rocked back and forth. The werewolves stood still in the darkness, and the mist blew this way and that, in between all of us. It was like an open-world video game, except those weren't digital werewolf NPCs on the shoreline. They were real-life, hungry dogmen, and they were waiting for their breakfast to row itself back to the shore. There was a kind of a sick sort of peace or equilibrium for a while. The dogmen seemed to be holding their spots on the shoreline, and I know that we certainly were attempting to stay as far from every shoreline as we could manage. I don't think we had a plan other than to try to keep a distance between us and any of the animal men. And then splash, there was another hairy, long-snouted, feral man in the water, trying to reach into the boat and tear our flesh from our bones. We beat that hairy beast man mercilessly, and we could hear the moaning coming from the land all around us. It sounded like Gregorian monks with nauseous stomachs, moaning in misery, more than trying to vibrate with the sound of the planet. These creatures emitted sounds of sadness, sounds of regret, sounds of pain and horror. Nothing happening in any direction around us was life-affirming, or even about life. It was about death. It was about horror. It was about unhappy misery. I beat at the head of that creature, trying to kill both me and my dad. It grabbed at my father's pant legs as Dad belted it repeatedly, pushing it back into the cold, dark wetness that it was trying to climb out of. When it stopped fighting and slipped away underneath us, I collapsed to the boat and wept as I coughed and gasped for air. I got sick over the side of the boat and expected to be grabbed and pulled under, now that I had nearly lost all my strength. Well, I wish I had a big climactic battle scene for you, or some genius way that my father and I outwitted the beastmen. But the truth was that we just held our own until the sun came up. Then we noticed the dogmen seemed to vanish under their own willpower, with no more persuasion from us. So that wasn't the end of it. The poltergeist activity remained. For a few months, we all had our personal belongings moved around by some aspect of this strange phenomena. My mother's car keys would end up inside jars of tomato sauce and bottles of milk. One of our uncles claimed to see the American werewolf in London on his way to visit us. I was never sure if he was serious about that one. The last odd thing I remember from that period happened the next spring. It was footsteps in our attic, and what sounded like deep-voiced laughter as well. That was when we actually met with some of our neighbors to discuss things that we should do, or maybe we should just move out. It took a month after our meeting for us to really notice that all the strange phenomena had decided to stop on its own. And then around a full year later, no more strange happenings were taking place at all. And a year after that, and a year after that. Now it seems, looking back on it, that each of our neighbors has had their own period of odd occurrences. One family claimed there were ugly little tiny green men wearing ragged clothing living under their land. They used to shout rude things and expose themselves to the ladies of the house. But then one day, the mean little men simply stopped coming around. It seems the same thing as what went down in terms of our dogman and poltergeist encounters that we were briefly suffering through. I don't know if the phenomena will ever come back, and I don't know what we would do if it did. When my father and I were on that lake that dark morning, surrounded by the glowing-eyed dogmen in every single direction, it felt pretty hopeless. I wouldn't ever want to be in that situation ever again. We only have fished on that lake since then, when we were coordinated with other people on the land, looking out for our safety. Nevertheless, we've never seen those dogmen again either, and neither have any of our neighbors. I can't really explain this lake that we live on the edge of, but I'm grateful that it seems to have gotten used to us, and that we no longer have to do battle with. The dogmen that tracked us clear across the lake. You want to meet a guy who's a total duderick? Then let me introduce Mr. Butch Ruderick. Mr. Butch here just became our newest channel member, helping to support this channel and make this show continue to happen. Here to explain how you can become one of the brave and the strong and the true, like Butch Ruderick, is our international TV spokesmongrel, Henry Lee Dogman. Hank. Thanks, Biggie, and thanks to all of you for watching this far. If you liked it, please click like. If you'd like to see more of our work, please subscribe. And also click that bell icon if you'd like to be notified when we put out a new episode. To become an executive producer, you can donate to us through the thanks button under each of our videos, or through our paypal.me/PeterBernard209 page. To receive cool perks like secret uncensored Dogman episodes far too wild to ever run on this channel, you can become a YouTube channel member by clicking the join button, or join our PayPal subscribers club at peterbernard.com. Joining either at the $3 a month level or above gets you access to our over 25 hours of secret uncensored Dogman stories available nowhere else. Do you have a scary story about Dogman or some other kind of high strangeness that happened to you? Let us know by emailing us at scarystoriesnyc@gmail.com or by leaving us a voicemail message at 804-LA-SCARY. You may need to call back on that one. It cuts off after, I think, 3 minutes. And if you don't want to do any of that stuff, thank you for simply watching to the end. Good night, and have a scary tomorrow.
Come back for more scary stories.